Matura's Mandala. Devotees are familiar with the term Shalagram Shila. I mean, as far as I know, shalagrams come from one specific place, which is the Gandaki River near Muktinath in the Himalayas. And, because I met a Baba in Junagadh who told me how he got his. And he said, it's the first time I actually heard. He said that he went there and he says, prayed to his guru, put his hands in the Gandaki, and this shalagram jumped into his hand. And that was the shalagram he had. So, did Kali Baba personally get the shalagram from the Gandaki? Did he tell you how he got it, or no? But he had it. But that's
he had a whole bunch of them. You know?
So, what would you can describe to people what's the significance of a shalagram and how it's
shalagram is a rare ammonite, a type of an ammonite fossil that comes from the bottom of the ocean billions of years ago, when the ocean was over the Himalayas. You know. And one little spot where they form is called the Krishna Gandaki River in Shalagram Kshetra, and that's where they come from. And but I didn't go there. He didn't go there. He just had he had a little duni, a little temple where he had a bunch of shalagrams in there. And he took me to I asked him for one of them, and he actually said, "No, I'm going to get you a better one." He took me to Pashupatinath temple, and there was one guy at Pashupatinath. He told that guy to give me one particular one that he had thought of, and the guy gave it to me. It was so perfect, I couldn't believe it, you know. And man, I still got it. I got pictures of it. It's like unbelievably perfect. It's like some kind of an amazing creation that you think, how could this even exist? You know. I'll send you a picture of it.
Thank you. Excuse me. Did you? While in the Gaudiya Math, you had, before you told the story about your Giri, Krishnas Babaji gave you the Govardhan, and then that's so. Yeah. But was there anybody in the mutts and places? Had you seen shalagrams being worshipped? Were you familiar with them at all?
Well, I remember when I first was in Vrindavan, and I was asking Swami Ban, how do he said they bathe the deities. So I'm looking at these deities, saying how they do that. He said, no, they don't bathe the deities. They just wipe them off and put clothes on. The bathing is done with the Shalagram Shila. Okay, what's that? That's the stone that represents Vishnu. And then there's the Govardhan Shila that also represents Krishna. And those stones are bathed. And that's where the bathing is done, not the actual Murti, Sri Murti.
Okay.
And so that's when I first heard about Shalagram. Of course, it's mentioned in Bhagavatam.
Mm-hmm.
But I never worshipped Shalagram until I was in Nepal.
Okay.
And had access to, and saw Kali Baba who had these, and he got me one. You know? And I still have it.
So there's some photographs of an event that happened with you. What was that event? Can you describe that?
Which one? You mean the Bhagavad?
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Sapta?
Yeah, I think that's
well, there was a school in Dhulikhel that needed a second floor. So I decided to pay for that because I had some money from the gem business that had started in Shyam Sundar. So I paid for the second floor. When it was finished, we were going to have a grand opening of that second floor of the school in Dhulikhel, and we decided to have a Bhagavad Sapta. And so I had the Padma Puran version of the Bhagavad Sapta instructions, and those guys, all those Nepali people, they knew every detail of it. And so we organized the Bhagavad Sapta, and I got a really great saint to come from the Himalayas to come read. We called him Sukdev. I've still got pictures of him. And he came down and read the whole thing. There was probably 100 people in there every day in the school listening to this thing. And everybody was fasting for 7 days. And then there was like 6 or 7 other Brahmins that were there to be assistant readers. And none of them had to read anything because he just did the whole thing, 18,000 verses, nonstop for 7 days himself. And then they just left. He just left.
Now,
he was a character.
So you briefly alluded, and I think what we've done is we've missed a whole little episode in your story. actually, because you just meant. See, I asked earlier if you had any money, but you do have some money, and and the whole story to Bombay and the visa. Now, somewhere in that story, which we haven't mentioned, is you got involved with these rubies. That so I think what we need to do is you need to explain that story, because to do what you just did and have that money for the school, there's a bit of the story that you need to explain, which is very interesting.
So we went to Dhulikhel, and I met Kali Baba, and we're up there hiding out from the investigation happening in Kathmandu.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes from Kathmandu with a telegram.
Right.
That had been tacked to a board at the Nepal Bank Limited.
Yeah. Post
People
restant.
would get things, and it was to me. So somebody brought it to me. It was from Sham Shunder saying, "Discovered ruby mine, come immediately." Discovered ruby mine, come immediately, and it had an address in Hyderabad.
Okay.
So I did. I went down there, snuck back in, and took a train down to Hyderabad and went to see him, and that's how I got involved with the rubies. And he was telling me he wanted me to go to Nepal. I mean, he wanted me to go to Thailand to set up a cutting factory. And it was all hurry hush hush in India because they didn't want the government to nationalize this mine. And and he was raving on and on about how he was going to take over the world and put satellites in space, and Sham Shunder.
So wait a minute. So how long had you? Okay, it was winter time-ish or late October when you went up to the mountains. You've met Kali Baba, had this this, and then you get this telegram to go.
Now it's 74. By now it's 74.
Okay, we've moved. Okay, so we've gone. And which month do you think we're in 74 now? Are we gone into the spring?
February, like that.
Okay, so we've turned into 74.
February, March, yeah.
You get the letter, you get the telegram from Shamasunder. You sneak back over the border illegally into go to Hyderabad. Was Shamasunder there, or did you just get the gems?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was there.
So because you're now talking now, you're 77 and you're in Bangkok, and we're going to get to what's happened in your life, but you're deeply involved with gems and jewels and the jewelry business now. This is the kind of beginning of that story with the gems for you in your life, isn't it? So it's kind of,
right.
So can you explain, because I think actually that Shamasunder hasn't really mentioned you in his book, and I think you need to, for historical sense, you need to explain that omission and your role in helping Shamasunder or selling them and your story with the gems. So it's really interesting story. What happened? So you went to Hyderabad and tell us what happened.
He wanted me to go to Thailand. I don't even know where Thailand is, and I don't have any visa to even leave the country. And so he told me to go to Thailand. He told me to take 5 kilos of rough rubies, go to Bombay, sell them to, I don't know, and for $1 a carat, and go to this place and get a entry visa from the black market in Bombay. And I did all that, and I was able to sell those stones too.
So how did that happen? So how many of these rough rubies did you take? I mean, what was the quantity?
5 kilos, which is 25,000 carats.
Wow. And so did you just have them in a bag going on the train, or did you fly to Bombay? How did you get to Bombay?
I took a train.
Okay. So and how did you sell those gems? How did they get sold?
There was some place called Dipti's House of Juices, in Bombay, or something like that. It was some kind of juice place where the hippies hung out. So I was in there having a juice, and the word got around. So some guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you the guy with the rubies?" And what's it to you? And all this stuff. So I had some rough stones. I showed him a couple of cut ones, a couple of rough ones on a table. And he asked me how much they were, how much I had. And I said I had 5 kilos. He said he was going to test them at the university there. And if they were really rubies, then he would buy all of them from me. So that's what happened.
Wow.
He bought them all.
Just by going to
25,000. So I got on a train, went back to Hyderabad, and gave the money to the Indian family, and they let me keep half of it, 12,005.
Ah,
He gave me 5 more kilos.
wow.
Take to Nepal. Take to Thailand.
Oh,
So I went back to Nepal to get Dave and Unda to go to Thailand,
I see.
and
Okay. So as we
I had these 5 kilos.
so as this adventure's unraveling, we're going. 74 is developing. We're going into the year
sure.
74. So you go back.
Yeah.
You now the first time in years you've got money to be able to do. You've got some freedom. You can even go to put some money towards a school in a village in Nepal. So things have really massively changed. There's a big shift. You've got a kind of a bogus ID passport, but it's actually going to serve you well for the next few years. It's amazing how calm
That's all I had.
yeah, but why did Shamsundar think that you were the guy that could do this? Why, out of all the people, he calls you from Nepal, and you got it's all wow.
I was his old friend, old next door neighbor, and he knew that I spoke Hindi.
Right.
He knew that I spoke. He knew that I was back with Prabhupada, and he needed me to help. Because and I did. I did help.
Wow. It's very intuitive, the fact that he knew that and you were this and this, because it was all connected with your destiny that was going to be. I mean, it's incredible, really.
Later on, I went back to Nepal again a bunch of times. One time, I had Malati and his daughter. What was her name? Saraswati.
Yeah.
Malati and Saraswati came to Nepal and stayed with me.
Okay. That's all happening. Okay. In between all that period.
And also some guy named David, who was a grave robber, some Shamsundar had met somewhere who was from New York, and he was like a horrible character, And he was Shamsundar's partner. I mean, this guy was horrible, and he's a complete non-devoted. You couldn't hardly become more non-devoted, and so he was such a creep.
But had you got rid of your brahmachari sannyas look?
No, I was still dressed up like that.
Wow! So you sold all those gems in Bombay and got the passport wow! So you had what? Okay, so when did you shift? Oh yes, and I was going to ask you that question. Okay, all these years you've been a monk, a sannyasi, a renounce. You were a handsome frontman for a big rock band. You could have been the pin-up for lots of lovely adolescent girls all over the world going, whoa, like they do with the rock bands. But suddenly that wasn't your destiny. You ended up in India as a monk, celibate, and now you're suddenly in Nepal, and you've in dressed as a sadhu. But what happened?
I was hanging out with. We were together with these hippies, and the second night the second or third night. They were like, somebody gave us some acid. And so we're all sitting there fried on this acid, Dave and Unda and me and these hippie people and Swayambhu, and some guys telling me about music. And that was when I heard that Hendrix had died. I had no idea that Hendrix had passed away or any of that stuff. And some guy was telling me, there's this group called UFO. Remember UFO? There was a band called UFO. Remember them?
I don't know. No, personally.
A British band named UFO.
Okay.
And they were heavy metal, some of the early hard rock. And they were, this band UFO, it's so great. And I'd love to hear them. He said, well, I've got a car, I've got a VW van out front. You can go in there and lay down and listen to the sound system, which is what I did. So I'm laying back there totally ripped, and he's got this music playing, and some girl comes in, some like 19-year-old Australian girl comes in and climbs in the back with me, and I'm like, man, forget about it,
Okay.
It's definitely not the place you want to be a seller. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just slowly freaking out, trying to think, how am I going to stay ahead of the law?
Yeah.
At this point. And so I ended up getting having sex with this girl, and it was really. Because I hadn't even passed semen in 6 years.
Wow.
Not even in a dream. Wow. It hadn't even occurred to me.
Right.
Nobody's thinking about sex. Nobody's struggling with it.
That's quite an amazing thing, I mean, anyway, I had my experience as a devotee. It's not the same for everybody, and that's why it's a specific. You've got your specific story, so that's an incredible thing. So after 6 years of total celibacy, even on the mental platform and everything, you're in the back of a truck listening to some rock music, high out of your kite on psychedelics, and a groovy chick. It's like a kind of, you couldn't make it up, could you? It's really, and there you go, and so after that, was that like a kind of I don't know. How did you see that?
Just imagine. I haven't been with a girl in 60 years, over 60 years, and I'm on acid, and there's this 19-year-old Australian girl, and I'm feeling her tits. I haven't even seen a tit, or to speak, a felt one, and I mean, it was a little more than normal because I was so stoned. So it was a little more outrageous than normal.
Yeah, wow.
So it was pretty radical.
Wow.
I remember thinking that's really unusual, to go for 6 years like that and then get it in a situation like this where it's all amplified by this LSD.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Incredible. Well, your whole story is kind of every aspect of it's like it's got wow factors on and everything, going to Shamasunder, getting, selling it to a guy here. So there was this kind of pressure on you, or this to go to Thailand. Okay, so how did when did you go backwards and forwards to Nepal and India many times before you ended up going to?
Bunch of times.
And when did you actually go to Thailand for the first time?
After that, I went back, and then we went to Thailand
with Dave Ananda.
I'm sorry, I went to Bangkok.
Sorry, with Dave Ananda.
No, I went to Bangkok. I went to Bangkok alone. Alone, not with Dave Ananda. And found a cutting place and started doing the cutting, and then came back again to.
So what was the plan then? So these rubies that you had on this going, you flogged a bunch of raw rubies. You've got some money. You've got the connection now. Are these rubies now coming directly from the family or via Shamasunder? What's going on in that story?
The family.
Okay, so you're doing this. This is you and the family, not even you.
I helped Shamasunder go back to. He had to go back to India. He had a bunch of stuff that he had cut, and he needed to smuggle them out of India. He had a backpack with all these tubes, the tubing, and he had filled them all these cut stones. And I don't know why he even worried about it. I mean, you could take loose stones into America without any duty. But he wanted to do all this thing, and so I helped him, and I helped him get money to get his ticket also.
Okay.
He had no money to get a ticket.
Okay.
So he wanted me to sell a kilo to somebody right there in Delhi. We were staying in the Fonseca Hotel before he left.
Okay.
And in Delhi, he wanted me to go out and sell he told me to get whatever I could, so I sold a kilo of rubies for $1,000 to some hippie.
Wow. But those were the raw. These ones raw. He was smuggling back to America. He got them cut in India or what?
Right.
Okay. In Jaipur? Was it in Jaipur or
no? He had them cut right there in Hyderabad.
Okay. So now we've gone from the raw stone. So your idea of going to Thailand is to get them cut.
But right from the start of David of Shamasunder introduced me to this ruby thing right there in Hyderabad in the very beginning, before I'd even gone back to anywhere, was I went to the bookstores and I got a book called Graha Gochar Jyotish and Ratna Pariksha and a bunch of Hindi books and a couple of English books. One English book was called Gem Therapy by Bhattacharya, and another. There were some books about gemology in the bookstores in Hyderabad, and they were all about astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship between gems and astrology. And I remember thinking, wow, this is like something. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized this is really amazing. Nobody's ever done a good job of this.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting.
The only way to do it is to do a good job, and nobody's doing a good job.
What do you mean by that? No one's doing a good job of what exactly?
No, if you're going to make a gemstone talisman, you need a gemstone. You don't need a junk.
Right.
Because people say, if you need the best stone to get the best result, but your goal is cheap, you're not going to get the best stone. If your goal is cheap and not good, so almost everybody who's got astrological jewelry are poor people, and they're all cheap and they're all using garbage stones.
Right.
And people who have money and they can afford the really good stones, they could care less about it, because when people do well in the world, they forget about God. They forget about it. They don't need any help. Kartaham miti manyate. That, Krishna says in the Gita, Prakriti kriya manani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankar vimuratma kartaham miti manyate. Whenever people do well, they start thinking, I've done all this. I don't need any help. I'm together, So Krishna doesn't help people that don't need help. So that's why he's called Dina Bandhu.
Yeah. Now, I mean,
people who aren't Dina could care less about God. When you get in the foxhole and the shells are coming over, okay, now we've got God to talk to. Once you're out of there and you got a bunch of money, forget about God. That's the way people are. It's pathetic,
So there's gems, jewels and gems, and through studying these books, you got deep, and then you realized actually there's good gems and there's not good gems. So you got more and more wised up about it.
Well, it's kind of like there's a clean glass of water and there's a muddy glass of water.
Yeah.
So which one you going to drink?
Yeah. So how much, say if you had 5 kilos of these uncut rubies, after they've gone to the cutters to can you tell from a raw ruby its quality, or does it have to be cut first before you can actually see it, or is it kind of obvious?
Well, those kind of rubies, they were translucent. They weren't opaque, like the Singali Mysore rubies. They weren't opaque, and they weren't purple like those Mysore rubies, but they weren't transparent like gem rubies. They were translucent. Light could shine through them, and they were kind of red. So they were better looking than the Mysore rubies, and they were not as good as the gem rubies. So they were the kind of rubies that the rough stones were. I was told to sell them for $1 a carat. Now, if you have a 10-carat piece that's going to cost $10 for the rough, and then you cut that, it cuts down to 5 carats.
Mm.
So now you've got to pay for the cutting cost for the 5 carats. It's the finished weight. So that's another $5 if it's $1 a carat. So you got $15 invested. Now you got a 5-carat cut stone that's worth $10 a carat.
Okay.
So if you invested 15 and you got a ruby that's worth 50, 55.
Okay. Okay. And then,
maybe more if it comes out really good. If it comes out even better than usual.
Oh, okay. When you say these terms, when it comes out, because I'm ignorant, I have to admit about what's involved with it. So when it comes out better than usual, you don't really know until you cut the stone how good it is. Is that how it is? Right. Okay.
Well, you have a general idea, but even amongst general ideas, there's going to be some standout pieces that just look more beautiful, attractive.
And the waste product of it, once you cut the stones, what happens to all the stuff that you don't use in the final?
That's just powder. That's just powder.
It's just powder. Okay.
This gets powdered.
So the whole goal then is to get the rough rubies, or this is the kind of project you were on. Go to Thailand, get them cut to increase the value, and to get them to a state where they're actually useful astrologically. Is that that what we're talking about?
No, they were never useful astrologically. Never.
Okay, they're not on that level.
Quality, no, because one of the first things I read when I started reading these books was the Garuda Puran had a section on gems, which clearly said every chapter they would say that this only applies to auspicious quality gems, and auspicious quality gems mean free of defects. The heavily flawed stones, which are this and that and the other, are just the opposite effect. They're bad effect. So in that regard, I was thinking, well, a synthetic stone has no effect, one way or the other. So at least it's safe.
Yeah.
But a real stone, if it's bad quality, is actually worse than nothing.
Right. So when you got wised up after reading all this astrological books and got understood, how did that affect your whole journey with this whole gem story? Where did it direct you?
Well, I had to get disconnected from these rubies. Because they just weren't going to be useful in astrology.
Okay. And then what did you do? So if you were planning to go to Thailand with these rubies, where did the plan change when you realized, these, I've got to get rid of these and move on to something else?
No, first of all, I had these rubies cut, and then I was recommended to go to Bali, so I went to Bali.
Okay.
And I found a goldsmith, and I started making astrological jewelry, but it wasn't really astrological, I was just making my own designs. I started selling these rubies set in silver and stuff, but I was also getting other good stuff. Like when I would be in Bangkok, I was cutting the rubies, but I was also buying rubies and sapphires of good quality, gem quality, from the local people. and getting them set in jewelry. So I was getting away from the rubies were just what we had, and I was trying to sell them. And then I got a letter from Shamsunder saying, because he was involved with this gangster guy named David. He called a grave robber. So this guy David even came to Nepal and stayed with me, for a little while, along with Malati and
Saraswati.
Saraswati, and so he sends me a letter saying, David and I have decided you should stop being involved in this, and we're going to take some action against you if you continue.
Right. I tell you what, I think that.
So I mentioned that. So I mentioned that in a book that was written in 1988. That he did that.
Okay.
And he didn't like. He read that book, and he didn't like that I told about that.
Okay. I think of this.
But, every time when you're a fugitive, and every time somebody threatens your fugitive status, for whatever reason, that's not something that's easy to let go of.
No. Matura's Nandana.